What situation were you in where the outcome was questionable, risky, and you just decided and said, frick it, and went with the risky choice? How did that turn out for you? I went out for a hike and somehow along the way I had lost the keys to my car, and it had started raining heavily, and now I was stranded by my car with no way to get in, and since this was several years ago, I didn't have a cell phone. I was weighing my options, figuring out where I could walk to find a payphone, when someone asked if I needed a ride. Everything about the situation said I should say no. I was alone, no one knew where I was, and hitching a ride with a stranger in an old beat-up pickup is a classic way to end up a missing person. But I was cold and wet and not wanting to make a long hike in the hopes of finding a phone, so I hopped in. Turns out, he was just a nice guy willing to give a ride to my place and then back to my car. And it gets better. Along the way he was telling me about the charity group he worked for, and it really sparked my interest. And seeing that my construction skills would fit in with what they were doing, I decided to apply. I ended up moving to Southern Africa, where I would spend some of the best years of my life, meeting my future wife, making great friends, etc. The entire path of my life would be completely different if I had never gotten into that truck. That said, I am not endorsing hitchhiking with random strangers. It's so strange how big of a deal the smallest decisions make. I was working through an extremely demanding emergency in a university IT department with a very capable co-worker. We resolved it successfully against many difficulties. The director of the department personally sought me out to offer congratulations and compliments. I decided, frick it, I'm going to tell him the truth, which was that I put in a lot of effort, but the real person who deserved credit was my co-worker, not me. He looked at me for a second and said, son, many people wouldn't have said that the way you did. The next time we have a management opening, it's yours if you want. This is very wholesome and shows that you have integrity. I was pretty hopelessly in love with my best friend of 5 years. I was so afraid that if I told him he would act awkward or he would leave me. I was also afraid that we might try dating and it wouldn't work out. One day I got the most courage I ever had and I told him. To my surprise, it wasn't awkward at all. And now we're getting married, so I guess risking it all does work out sometimes. YMMV. I had a friend of 11 years finally have the courage to ask me out. Dated, then he just left me and blocked me. I moved to another country to live with my then girlfriend. It was always going to have risks, and indeed we broke up 9 months after moving in together. It's now 12 months after the breakup and I have a new job, which happens to be the highest paid job I've ever had. New friends, a new partner, I'm buying my first house, and I'm the happiest I've ever been. That risky choice led me to a dark place for a few months, but I came back swinging. Short story, 200% worth it. Best of luck to you. So glad it worked out. Decided to risk a fart when I wasn't feeling too well at school. I suddenly had to go to the nurse's office and then home for some odd reason. Happened to me in 3rd grade, except the school nurse refused to call my mom. She had backup clothes for me to wear and everyone was wondering why I suddenly was wearing black jeans. Frick that nurse. I agreed to marry a guy who would take me far away from my abusive family. I'd known him for just a couple years and didn't love him. I'm sure he didn't love me either, but he did take me far away from dangerous people. We were married for 10 years. During that time I did everything I could to make him happy, to thank him in any way that I could for saving my life. But we had our share of problems. He'd always liked to drink, but over the years he turned into an alcoholic. When I realized that I was no longer safe with him, I left. We still see each other almost every day and help each other out in our day-to-day lives. We have 1 child together. He's stopped drinking, and for a while we talked about canceling the divorce process, but it's not going to happen. I don't regret my decision to marry him one little bit. We buy each other groceries, share meals, laugh, watch movies together, go on vacations, do projects together, help each other financially on the rare occasions when we need to, etc. Sounds like you still have a good relationship. It just doesn't look like what is considered a normal relationship. There's nothing wrong with that. Did way more hits of acid than I normally did. Back in the late 90s, I went nuts. My friends hog-tied me with belts, and I tried to bite my thumb off. I think we would all appreciate more details. Waffles from scratch. I substituted baking soda for baking powder. It did not turn out well and I strongly advise against it. This is probably the most useful advice here. Thanks. Packed up and moved to Montana with no job or housing lined up and only knowing one person in my destination. I'm a homeowner with a great job and have made lots of friends out here, so I'd say it went pretty well. Vacationing in DC with some friends last year. Marijuana laws are shady AF out there. It's legal to smoke ab gift, but not legal to sell it. So we googled around and found an underground collective. You had to text them, and they would send you back an address. So we get the address and call an Uber. We are 5 nerdy white guys in town for a Protest the Hero show to help you picture us. Well, we notice we are driving into the rather unsavory portion of DC, like boarded up windows and bars over those that aren't boarded and graffitied up. We decide we really don't want to get out here, but our Uber driver essentially kicks us out. We immediately get swarmed by a group of 5 gangster looking people hitting us up for cigarettes and money. We weasel our way away and start walking towards the address. No car or transportation with pockets full of cash for some weed in the ghetto. Well, we get to where we were supposed to go. A boarded up shop front with a 6'4" 300 pounds guy with dreads waves us over. We walk up to him, and he apparently knew why we were there. He takes us inside to a windowless lobby and tells us to get out our wallets. Immediately knew we were getting freaking robbed and possibly worse. I've seen The Wire and knew what Snoop did in buildings like this. I hand him my wallet and he rolls his eyes and says, "Get your id out, fool." He verifies we are all 21 and then opens a solid metal door. It was like a freaking movie. He opens the door and Snoop Dogg is playing and there are 10 tables set up in a circle full of high quality bud and edibles and all sorts of things. We make our rounds, buy a bunch of stickers and pens, got gifted our associated weed gifts for making purchases, got the frick out and got an Uber back to our Airbnb and proceeded to smoke till we couldn't move. That was a roller coaster of emotions. Going from being so sure I was about to die to my first legal weed experience. I swear to God I have a very similar DC pop-up story. Hilarious. I don't trust easily nor do I build relationships quickly, but I went on a date with a guy and things went incredibly, almost like in a movie. We were so compatible and he had me laughing and smiling all through dinner. He was courteous, opened all the doors for me, etc. After dinner we went to my house and watched a movie and had a bottle of wine. We were making jokes about the stupid movie scenes and having a great time. I have never had first date sex because I viewed it as a risk, both health-wise and emotionally because I bond a lot through sex. I decided to do it, though. We had sex on our first date. It's about 1.5 years later now and we live together. He's sound asleep next to me in bed. He makes me happier than any man I've ever met. My husband just loves bragging that I put out on the first date, lol. I like that he's proud of me. Back in my scoot or die phase, I tried to jump down 16 stairs on my scooter. I had done 12 previously, but never 16. I was really nervous and knew it was risky, but one day I was feeling confident so I just went for it. I broke my toe on my first try and retired from extreme scootering. Still would cruise around with friends, but didn't do any more big stair gaps. Skate or die. Skate or die. DDDD. I live in a not so good neighborhood. I really wanted an Xbox Live 1 month subscription to play Halo and my dad didn't wanna take me to go get it. I really wanted to play so I decided frick it, I'ma ride my bike over to a GameStop by myself. I told my dad I was gonna go to a friend's house the next block over. I did go, but I told my friend that I was gonna go to GameStop to get her Xbox Live card. So I got my bike and I rode over to a GameStop. It's not super far but far enough for it to be dangerous. Midway my tire goes flat and at that point I was already too close to GameStop to turn around and head home. So I keep pushing with my flat tire and eventually get there. I set my bike up against the wall and went inside. Turns out GameStop didn't freaking sell those 1 month subscriptions and I went over there for nothing. As I was taking to the cashier making sure they didn't, I turn around and see some dude holding my bike. I run outside to tell him it's mine and kinda looks at me and then back. I guess he realized it wasn't worth it to steal a bike with a flat tire, so he just dropped it and walked away. I started to ride back, and by the time I got home it was basically dark and I was just exhausted from riding a bike on a flat. Still pisses me off that GameStop didn't carry those. I was about 12 at the time. Got hired to a new job. 1 month in, I get a call for another job. Better paid but longer trial period. More stringent on retention since it's one of those you're here forever deals. Decided to kick my bird in the hand to the curb and give it a whirl with the new job. I felt awful, to be honest. Manager at the place I left was awesome, but it had to be done. Even so, I knew if I blew it at the new place, there'd be no going back to the previous, and I'd either have a weird gap on my resume or a hard to explain little blip in the middle. Thankfully, it all worked out. I had a job offer for a relatively safe job in my hometown. I was waiting to do a second interview for a job way above my experience level, at twice the salary, but at a city 2 hours away. Job offer in my hometown couldn't wait until after I completed the second interview. I went frick it, turned it down, went for my other interview. I now live at that city 2 hours away, making more than I ever would as a starting position in my hometown. When I was 16 I needed to be home in about 5 minutes. My friend called a drug dealer and bought some weed. We smoked a bowl right then and went home 3 hours later. I'm 20, live alone, and still grounded. Sex without a condom or BC. I was like 15 or 16 and I knew it was a bad idea, but also, how many people actually get pregnant? It turned out well for me. No kids, but Christ was I stupid. I get why they teach that unprotected sex will lead to pregnancy in schools, but dang. Really makes you feel like crap when you've been taking creamy loads every fertile week for 6 months and still don't have a baby, lol. Got locked out of house on a snowy night. I was also drunk and in my late teens. Decided to climb to the one window several floors up that I knew was open. While I was successful, and therefore didn't freeze, I think about that moment sometimes and absolutely cringe thinking on how it could have gone terribly wrong. Haven't done anything similar since. Also, 5 platinums whoa. Had one of those tests where you're supposed to answer between 2 answers, left or the right, yes or no questions. I did not know a single answer, so I just went frick it and put every answer on the same lane. Got 7 out of 11 questions right, so suck it USA education system. I remember being in high school and a teacher telling us that she once had a student that loved AC/DC. On every multiple choice test, he'd just fill out ACK for the answers. He'd do reasonably well, getting at least a C or better. So she decided to make a test with every answer as B. He failed that one. The biggest one was leaving a comfortable job I did well, sales management and training, to a new one I wasn't so sure about, computers. I had a family that would be vastly affected if I failed, but the pay was so much better and more stable. I mean, I could miss out on commissions, but overall I felt it was better pay. This was right before the dot-com boom in 1995. There were few assurances. I now make 6 figures, nearly 6 times my paychecks from back then, and I love what I do. I had a lot of dumb luck, but luck favors the prepared. Don't forget inflation, but you are an inspiration, thanks. On a date, waiter fricked up my order. Do I complain? Send it back and look like jerk? Frick it. I really wanted garlic fries, not regular. Bad idea. She thought I was a finicky dong. That's bulls. Nobody should be judged for wanting the garlic fries they ordered. I was in need of money to pay off a loan that was going to double if I didn't pay it by a certain date. McDonald's pay enough to meet my deadline. After debating with myself, I decided to be a cam model and was one for 2 months. I paid off the loan relatively quickly but continued camming. It was easy money for the small amount of time I invested into it. Username explains a lot. Putting my voice out there, I stream on Twitch for most of my income at the moment, and I was never too impressed with myself. I have a bad habit of starting things and never going anywhere with them since I started streaming. I've made so many friends from all over the world. They've all given me the confidence to start chasing one of my dreams, voice acting, and now my voice might have made it into a video game demo. I'm also lined up to voice a character for a game mod. Although small steps, this is infinitely further than I ever thought I would go. Some girl messaged me on a dating website 3 years ago. She lived across the country. We hit it off, but she was wishy-washy, and I immediately fell and committed to her. A few months later I decided she was worth the risk. I left my family and my job and moved in with her and her parents in a new state and city 3k miles away from where I grew up and lived for my whole life. 3 years and an engagement later, I am now freshly single, not my choice, in a state where I don't have close friends or family. But hey, I built a lot of memories and grew a lot as a person. A month or so ago I was in Brooklyn, meeting friends for a drink at a friend's sister's boyfriend's bar or some crap. I was staying in Manhattan. The friends I was meeting were in East Brooklyn-ish. We met up, had the most lovely time, super drunk on a Monday night in New York, and I get in my lift share to go back to Manhattan. Second passenger gets in, and I say crap, I forgot my bag in the final bar we went to. Told the Lyft driver, hey, I am just gonna walk back and get it. I was leaving New York the next day and didn't have time to go back to get it in the morning, even though I had less than 10% on my phone left and it was 30 degrees. Phone died. Got lost for an hour in residential Brooklyn. Didn't see another human soul until I stumble upon 2 women smoking. It's 3 AM mind you, and I'm drunk, crying, alone, dead phone. I'm like, hey, I am so sorry to bother you. I left my backpack in a bar at such and such intersection. Can you just point me towards it? I am lost and nobody knows I am here. I crap you not. One of the women was my Lyft share passenger from an hour or 2 ago. She's like, honey, I know. I was in the Lyft that you got out of. You could have just had us turn around and get it. Lem call you a Lyft, the bar is a mile that way. Calls me a Lyft. I get to the bar before it closed. Plugged in my phone at the bar. Bartender gave me a free shot to help my drunk butt get drunker and celebrate not dying. Lifted back to Manhattan and told my friends the story in the morning. When I was 19 I hitchhiked around Iceland with my best friend on our way to study abroad in France. At some point a car with 4 Spanish guys in their late 20s early 30s offered us a ride. We ended up riding with them for a few hours and we exchanged Facebook profiles. A few months later, while I was in France, I decided to do a long weekend trip to Spain. So I hit up one of the guys who had given us a ride to ask for suggestions of things to do. He offered me a place to crash, and then a few days later said his parents had a cabin in the mountains and asked if I'd want to go there for the weekend to do some hiking and explore the local caves and small towns. Looking back, as a 19-year-old girl who spoke zero Spanish and barely knew this guy, I should not have agreed to go. But it ended up being a fantastic time. We did end up doing a lot of hiking, eating local foods, etc, and he was a perfect, platonic gentleman. 3 years later we still keep in touch. Most people aren't serial killers. I had the chance to go to college overseas, a pretty good college, with a very good scholarship. The first time I'd been excited about anything college related, but that would mean leaving my only friend and all of my family behind, and going to live by myself. Which doesn't seem that risky, but I was extremely depressed and considering suicide pretty much every day, which meant that if I left and things went wrong, I'd be in a country I didn't know anyone, living by myself, with healthcare that didn't cover a therapist, and at risk of killing myself. I had to spend 2 months with constant visits to my therapist to convince myself of going, and even then I cried the entire trip over there. I literally made a friend day 1. 5 years later and she's still one of my best friends, and I tell her constantly how much she means to me, but I never told her that she literally saved my life. I don't know if I could have done it if she hadn't made friends with me, because from that, I became friends with the most amazing people, and met the love of my life. I'm a completely different person because of her, because of them, and if it wasn't for that I wouldn't even be here anymore. Moved nearly 1,000 miles away for college, to a city where I knew nobody. Spent the entirety of my senior year of high school hearing why the heck are you doing that, and that was without actually telling anyone what my major was. Pretty much just packed up and went, no backup plan, no plans of ever returning to where I came from. My own family doesn't know my major. I'm almost done with my first year of school, and I absolutely cannot imagine being anywhere else. The city I spent years daydreaming about exceeds my expectations every day. I am so grateful that I trusted myself to go after a dream I'd been told was impossible. I can't wait to see what the future holds. I think you got into a questionable situation and decided to just give yourself 5 platinums. How did it turn out for you? This is exactly what I want to know. I met up with a guy I met on Tinder at a hotel. We didn't even text much beforehand. He just said let's meet up here. I did let my best friend know where I was going and shared my location, but in retrospect and even in the moment I thought girls die from experiences and meetups like that. I was going through a hedonism phase, which is why I said frick it. He actually became my boyfriend for like 7 months and it was the best sex I've had so far, so I guess it didn't turn out bad. I don't think I'd do something that reckless again though. I have a sailboat. I swear to God I don't try to get Tinder dates to go on the boat with me on a first date, but they see sailing pics and often ask to go. I've had some hot sex with girls I hardly know on the boat and have thought, they really shouldn't trust me this much. They barely know me and we are out on the open water. I met my wife when I was on vacation 5 years ago in Florida. I was walking down the street and heard a song by The Offspring playing at a bar, so I walked across the street to check it out. I met her at 3 AM, and we spent the following 3 days together. We fell madly in love almost instantly. We clicked on every level. She was living out of a hostel and had no family anywhere. When I was flying back home, my flight had an engine malfunction, so I was stuck one more night. She met me at the airport that evening and we took the flight the next day together back to my city. A year later we were engaged. A year followed that and we were married. We had a baby almost a year after that. Our families were so incredibly happy for both of us. We had something I don't think many people ever experience in their lifetime. I'm now a very happily divorced single dad. My son's favorite superhero is Spider-Man and we have tickets to the new Avengers movie coming out. I also crush it on Tinder when he visits his mom. This had a very unexpected ending. Had a very comfortable job in a law firm as a paralegal. Got an offer to run the local office of a national firm at 23. The risk was that the type of law that the new firm was doing is notoriously fragile, high stress, and there was no guarantee of longevity. I took the risk. The 12k more a year and spent the next year bouncing between loving and hating my job every day. After a year I pulled the plug and left, but I was able to parlay that experience into a huge raise for my current position and now run a mid-sized defense firm and have for several years, far exceeding the salary I would have ever received if I would have stayed as a paralegal. First solo flight in a Cessna 172 before I went to military flight school. There was a pre-flight battery check just prior to takeoff, and if you pulled a switch and the indicator dropped below a certain threshold, the instructions dictated you were to return to the fight line. I pulled the switch and wouldn't you know, it was just below the minimum threshold. I literally said frick it and called tower to taxi to the runway to take off. I worked hard to get to solo and didn't want to risk going past my required timeline and jeopardize my chances of flying in the military. Flight was fine, and when I landed at a different airport to refuel I did the same test before takeoff and the batteries were fine. Looking back, it was a stupid mistake and one I would never do again. 0/10 would recommend. I could have easily killed myself. Wound up going to fight school but realized it wasn't for me. So I found another community to serve in and it wound up being the best career decision I ever made. I don't want to say I never wanted to be married, but I never saw it in my plans. The idea of waking up to the same person day in and day out seemed rather disappointing. Having to ask for permission for anything and discuss all decisions through someone else wasn't in me. When I became pregnant at 19, I actually left the father just due to bad life decisions. I'm one of those. I can't tell you what to do with your life, but I don't have to stick around and be an accessory kind of person. I moved back home, and 4 years later, I went to college and worked full time at a diner. I would get my kicks where I could, and go then home to be mom. In my second year, I met a man who was 19. I was 24. It started out as studying and then moved on to dating. He would always compliment me, and I would always shoot it down to him just running game. I even told him that. 6 months in, I told him I loved him and he said it back. A year and a half after, he proposed, and I didn't even hesitate to say, yes, we've been together for 5 years and I've never been happier. We even had a child almost 2 years ago. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.